Hi guys, I'm Rita and this is Tech Bible's episode with Anthony Collias. Hi Anthony.
Hi guys.
How are you doing today?
I'm good.
So Anthony, you are an Oxford Uni grad, graduated back in 2015.
That's painful to hear.
Oh. We're already 2022.
I know,
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Went off to start two startups.
I did, it's true.
Stasher and...
Treepoints.
You also are a content creator.
Secretly I am, yes, that's my hobby. I do a podcast, that's the main thing. It's a morality of everyday things. It's just everyday philosophy talk I do with my co-founder, so we keep it really tight. Like, we're not allowed to do anything not together. And then we also do some angel investing. Me, him, and one of the guys we work with at Stasher have a little syndicate thing.
All right, what's the coolest thing you've invested in lately?
The coolest thing, actually one that I really like, to be fair, all of them are cool, because I don't want to say the ones that I don't name aren't cool, but the most recent one is quite easiest way to say is it's like Costco and Whole Foods kind of in one, online.
Wow.
So you pay a membership and then they basically sell products way cheaper than you normally buy them because they're not making their margin on the sale, they're making their margin on the membership. It's called Well Easy.
Nice.
So especially if you do like keto diets or any kind of health-focused diet, muscle-building diet, stuff like that, they really focus on that kind of stuff.
Amazing. I'm picking up on a little bit of international accent there. Where are you from?
North London. No, I moved around a bunch as a kid. So my dad did grow up in North London actually. I grew up abroad mostly until kind of late teens, and I did last little bit of school, uni, and since then I've been here. So I was British at birth, which made it legally way easier coming here for the last bit. And my mum was from Bulgaria.
Amazing.
Yeah. We were in Istanbul, Dubai, Holland a bunch as kids. We moved around. Fun.
Really cool.
Yeah.
So you're 27, living in London, running two startups.
Life is fun.
How do you manage all of it? How do you sustain your friendships, relationships with your family?
Who said I have any? No, weirdly, like I would say that a practical point. So, and I'll explain a little bit about the history of the two startups. So we run a travel business called Stasher, where you can store your luggage with local shops and hotels. So imagine your Airbnb kicked out at like 10 a.m. You can leave your stuff with the local business. It's a platform, so it scales really easily. So we do it all over the world, and it's going swimmingly. We raised some money. We closed a round of 2 million in January 2020, and then obviously February 2020, COVID kind of happens, and literally went from six-figure revenue in February, March, to like zero in April because we just paused everything. There was no point. That was when the whole world was panicked. It was like okay. And so we had a bunch of time. And that's really when we started doing the podcast, started doing the social enterprise as well. And now everything's going to come to a head, everything's busy. It wouldn't be manageable if we didn't have excellent people and the companies weren't, particularly Stasher, wasn't at a state of relative maturity. And we didn't have quite understanding investors because we kind of talked to them about doing the social enterprise alongside. And I would also say my overall belief on work and friends and life in general is a few things. First of all, when it comes to business, I optimize to happiness, right? Because a lot of businesses, you think you optimize to money, but don't get me wrong, I'm not being, naive, happiness. Having a successful business is part of being happy, right? Feeling not just having the money to do the things that you want to do as a business or personally, but also, it's a source of self-esteem as a founder, in honesty, which was one of the hardest things for a lot of people going through COVID. It was part of it was rug being swept out business-wise. Part of it was who am I if my business has suddenly disappeared? So making money is an important part of that, but there are trade-offs that you consider at some point, and that's both, in your fulfillment and connections with other people, and also, even when you're running the business, are you willing to compromise on things that you feel are important, like treating employees as fairly as you want to, or, not breaking any rules and stuff. Because when you think about the kind of largest companies, you're under a lot of pressure, you raise a lot of money, and it's kind of that growth at all costs thing. Actually, a good example of this, I think we're going to touch on it later, but it's the Uber thing, right? When you raise that much money, you are under a lot of pressure to start optimizing to purely making more money.
Going back to my question, just how do you do it day to day?
Day to day. I think one of the things is that we're strict with our time. Okay. And I actually mean that in the inverse. We set limits on when we work. Me, my co-founder, and then, by extension, people on the team. It's, we set clear times when we work and don't work. My personal belief is that, honestly, people don't have more than 4 tops really focused hard work hours in them per day. Like I'm talking the kind of like crunch time deadline, like you have to work really hard. Like if we're talking that intense, it's more like 3, and we tend to spread that out over like 5 or 6. But like when you get people doing 12-hour days, they're just not productive. Like it's, if you go from a 6-hour day to a 12-hour day, you're not twice as productive. Like every hour you're incrementally less productive, and then you're also actually pushing down the previous hours because you're tired and you don't have a social life and you're unhappy, and then you get burnout and people leave, and then you have to pay to replace them. It doesn't even make financial sense. So we set like guards on that, and like are quite good with ourselves of like, this is the time of day where you stop, this is the weekend, like unless you really want to, no, like don't do work stuff, take the time off, enjoy holidays, things like that.
Amazing. So what did you study at Oxford?
I studied politics, philosophy, and economics. I have no interest in being a politician, which is the first question people ask when you say that. Well, the first one that people look at you and you can see they're thinking like, are you a dick? And it's, yes, but not because of what I studied. And no, like it was, I mean, it's a super interesting course. Like it's, as far as like being a citizen goes, like it's like the thing that you wish everyone kind of does a little bit of, and particularly political philosophy. Like everything in an organized society is largely political, and a lot of people don't think of it that way. Yeah.
And do you code?
I can, but pretty rudimentary.
Choose not to.
Yeah, no, I don't get me wrong. I can write scripts. Like I can, if I want to, like the most recent thing I did was like something to like scrape some data from maps listings and then automatically send some emails with some service that we're using. So like I can do basic stuff like that. I couldn't put together a website myself. I couldn't.
Was that self-taught? Did you?
Yeah.
Did you have to learn it like with the business or?
No, it was actually like independent of the business. There was a time in my life I thought I would become a developer, and then I kind of realized a few things. One, personal temperament, it involves sitting down, being focused for long periods of time, which just doesn't suit my type of work. So something like sales or partnerships works way better for that. Like talk to a lot of people, very varied stuff, like hour to hour. And then also I kind of realized through the process of running the business, like ultimately, the skill set you kind of end up developing is management, and it would take several years to become a really great developer. And then it's unique in that you can focus on being a great developer, but usually to progress you hit some ceiling and you have to become a manager. And then it kind of felt a bit like, do I really want to learn the skill set to then become a manager of people with that skill set rather than just continue on the path I'm on, which is just business and ultimately be a manager in that.
I feel like a lot of people kind of think they have a business idea that involves a little bit of code, but then they're like, I can't do that because I need to teach myself how to code, but not necessarily. You can just find someone who actually can code and help you build the idea.
I agree with that as like a principle. Like you can work in tech startups without being a developer. But I'd even go a step further and be like, you know what? For most of the ideas that people tell me nowadays, it's like there are so many no-code tools that you can use to build that without even needing to find someone who's a developer. Because it's hard to find a developer to buy into what you're doing. Like between like Webflow and Bubble, and those are the ones where you have to do some work and make it. But there's even out-of-the-box stuff. Like lots of people want to make a business that's basically some form of e-commerce or subscription, like either Shopify or WooCommerce with some apps and plugins will do, or maybe some stuff tied together with Zapier. You can build most products that people are thinking of, at least an MVP, without a developer. Which is why, like for the angel investing, the thing I hate most is when someone's like, oh, I'm doing this thing. And I'm like, okay, so what kind of traction do you have? And they're like, well, I'm raising the money so I can get a developer. And it's like, you have no excuse to not get some validation. Yeah.
Amazing. So why the travel industry? Why Stasher?
It's just random. It's random luck. So what happened was I was living between Euston and King's Cross, and basically this was the year after uni. I was going to go do a computer science master's. I was going to, like I said, I was going to go down that path and ended up not doing it. And basically, I always had people asking to leave stuff with me and my brother there. And my co-founder was doing a master's at UCL, and they were running like a startup competition program, and we wanted to do it. And we're like, let's make like Airbnb for storage. But the original idea was like anything, like long-term storage, people's homes, people's businesses, whatever. No limits, no holds barred. But what actually happened was we set it up. We realized that like long-term storage is very well catered to, and the incentives are different. Like if you're doing long-term storage, like it's just really hard to compete with the option of just driving your stuff somewhere cheaper. The only time that the premium of like central location makes sense is when it's only for a short while, right? So there's no time to move it out. And also logistics, never mind that. And everyone who was using it was traveling somewhere or going to like an event or a football game or something. So we basically realized, okay, that's what we want to focus on, like the short term storing stuff for like a day to a week. And it was mostly people's suitcases. And then we also realized if we're focusing on those people, homes made no sense. The booking value was way too low for people to like talk about negotiating entry and exit and stuff.
For safety reasons as well, like I don't
yeah,
think
it's weird letting people into your home for that. Whereas like a shop front, like they get it's public access anyway. It's very clear where it is. They're open anyway. They have much more space. It made way more sense, and ended up storing short term people's bags in businesses. And yeah, the use case is just travel. So like, it's funny. Sometimes people are like, oh, you run a storage business, and it's like, well, yeah, but like I run a storage business in the same way that like Avis runs a car business. Like, yes, technically that's the thing they're selling, but like really it's a travel business. Like who are you selling it to? Travelers. Who are the companies you work with? Travel businesses. It's all travel.
Exactly. And how do you find businesses to work with?
The hosts?
Yeah.
So it's a mix. So like we work with a bunch of hotel groups. Premier Inn is the biggest one, and we work with a few hundred of them around the UK and a few other geographies. They're kind of expanding. So that's kind of the upper end. And then, other hotel groups, there's a few that we're in early stage talks with, not early stage, like we're going live with them, but I'm not gonna, my competitors, you at least look on my website rather than just getting the answer here. At least comb through all of them and try to find out. So that's kind of one end, you're like, and that's the one where you're like sending cold emails to like high level people, like innovation managers, CEOs, execs. So at the Premier Inn one, literally sent a cold email to the CEO of Whitbread, who's like the holding company who owns them, and I was like, this would be great for you. And they just forwarded it down to an innovation manager, and that's how we did it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's fun. And then in the mid-level, there's like some franchises who are like smaller than hotel groups, but similar dynamic. You're talking to someone central, and they're kind of help rolling it out, either helping you talk to people in the individual shops, or are literally centralized and controlling it. And then at like the easiest level, and this is kind of the sale, like people talk about like sales strategies of like elephant hunting, and you have like elephants, deers, rabbits. Rabbits for us is just like little independents. So like,
talk to us a little bit about that, because I've never heard that before.
Oh, it's just like, okay, so if you think about sales strategies, elephants are like the ones who are like, if you catch one, like that one sale will change your business. Like it's a huge sale, right? Okay. The problem is they tend to have really long sales cycles, and even if it's going well, like never mind the fact that it's long, like they're hard to even close or get to the point of being halfway through long, right? Whereas then you have the easy wins. So that could be, if you're selling a SaaS product, the elephant is the enterprise customer, the rabbit is the 5-person startup who likes your thing, and you convince one person and they'll at least try it, but it's only worth £10 a month to you or whatever, right? Yep. So for us, those people, the ones at the bottom, will be like little independent shops who, a lot of them, for example, will already do whatever kind of pick up, drop off kind of service, and will reach a lot of them, it's either in person or remotely via email or calls and stuff like that. Why
not have a marketplace on their end to sign up and just
as in self-sign up
offer? Yeah.
No, they can sign up themselves. It's just one of those things where it's like, well, how do they find out about it?
Yeah.
I mean, like, don't get me wrong, like over time we're getting more people sign themselves up. They're like, I just heard about stuff like this and Googled and found you, or like we've had a few cases where people similar to Airbnb are like, oh, I used you while I was traveling and I own a small business, and a lot of things like that. But the fastest way to do it is direct sales. Yeah. Like contact the businesses directly, because I guess a lot of them aren't Googling for solutions like this.
What's the benefit of having Stasher in their locations?
So, I mean, obviously they make money on the bags that they store.
Yeah.
So they retain about 50%. And the first thing people ask is 50%. That sounds like a lot.
That is.
Because the average order value is so much lower in order for a business to work. Flip it around. Like Airbnb tends to hundreds on your rental. We take £2 to £3, or in some cases 3 and a bit on the storage per bag, right? So like, how many bags do we need to store to run a business, right? Yeah. One New York rental by Airbnb is worth a lot more than many bags in terms of commission. So it's because of the average order value, we have to take a higher share. And they also get a lot of added value because they're a business who's open anyway.
Traffic.
Yeah, exactly. So they're getting
New
people
customers.
in. If it's a hotel group, it's like brand awareness. It's like a Premier Inn, you're bringing in people who are probably Airbnb guests, and they're getting a chance to be like, oh, this hotel group looks okay, I'll stay here. And it also gives them some idea of data, like how much space they're using, who's coming and why. But primarily it's the money, right? People do it to make money. And I think, yeah, the really important thing is, like I said, if it's a business, they're open anyway.
Yep.
They probably have the space anyway. It's not even, I mean, even Airbnb, like there is still the faff and bother of like, I need to clean the place, I need to put it on the platforms and manage my listing and stuff, right? Which is why you generally pay either a management company or you accept that it's going to be quite a lot of work, right? For us, it's literally, you just need to check people's confirmation emails and help them put the bag away. Like it's really using assets that you have anyway, the physical space and the people at the desks and stuff.
And what's your vision for Stasher? Next five
I mean, like, so the number one thing is for now, like, so you quote next 5, for the next year or two, there's so much headroom with the core business. So I think like a lot of people talk about unfair advantages or like, are you familiar with the Matrix? This is a typical Teal, I mean, he's a weird dude, but his 0 to 1 book is interesting. And it's true, like, the same thing comes up in A Signal in the Noise by Nate Silver, quite famous statistician in the US. And it's just the problem with most trading, it's the same with VC investing, is that like, there's a little matrix and it's 4 quadrants and it's like you can be right or wrong and you can be consensus or non-consensus, right? And to truly make an outsized return compared to everyone else, you need to be right and non-consensus. So you need to make a bet that's different to everyone else and be correct, right? Whereas what actually happens is that most people are making consensus bets because no one's going to blame you if you're consensus, and the ones who do well tend to be consensus and right. And then you do middling well. But to truly like stand out, to be like a, you know, when we're talking like the guys in The Big Short who make a ton of money when the market collapses in 08, that's being right and non-consensus, right? And that's also what gets you all the cred and everyone's like, wow. So I think Stasher's thing that's right and non-consensus is just the fact that it's a larger opportunity than people think. People hear luggage stories and they're like, how big could that be? And it's like, well, how many cities are there in the world and how many people are traveling? So like Airbnb, it's not people, it's checkouts. You know, one person can say Airbnb several times, but like there's well over 1 billion check-ins and outs a year. Each one is an opportunity for people to use our service. This is one of the main use cases. And we know from managers what the percentage of users are. We call it, I don't know, 20% to be conservative. You know, that itself presents opportunity to make revenue in the hundreds of millions if you're storing all of those bags without thinking like, okay, what about sources other than Airbnb? What about totally different use cases, like people going to events and stuff? What about expanding service lines? So the two things would be tons of headroom in the core thing, get into more cities, get more depth in cities we're in, and then the other thing would be new revenue lines. So new services that leverage either our audience or our network.
What kind of partners do you think make the most sense for you to partner with? Like you were mentioning Airbnb and other hotel groups. I know that you're partnering with hotel groups at the moment, but what about Airbnb and in the likes of it?
Yeah, so OTAs, vacation rental focused OTAs would be like super value partnerships.
OTAs
right? Yeah, online travel agent.
Okay.
Just where you book your accommodation and stuff. Yeah, makes tons of sense if that could be embedded there. Like,
oh yeah, that's
this is
true.
where you do the stuff, right?
I need to see Stasher on Ryanair. You know when you check out, they offer you a bunch of stuff. That's definitely something.
Yep, maybe not at the point you're booking your flight, but at the point you're doing vacation rental and accommodation for sure. So that would be a common sense one.
Why not when you're booking your flight? Because that's where you usually...
It's just about how people think about the behavior, right? Because it's a low consideration purchase. Okay. So like, when I say this it might sound common sense, but I also have the data to back it up. When people see this, they're like, if you did it at the point of flight, people would see it and be like, oh, that's interesting, I might need it later. They don't book it at the time. They don't you don't know what time you're even going to be free or that you'll need to leave your stuff and plan to do other stuff until like the day before or the morning of. So most people book, like, I don't know the number, but like 80 to 90% of people book like 0 to 1 day from first getting onto the website. It's a last consideration purchase. Okay. So it's really when people are checking out. The easiest partners, I mean, working with an OTA is hard, right? Integrating anything to OTA is hard. Think about the amount of territory you need to cover for it to make sense for them to bother doing the integration. The easier one is we work with vacation rental managers. So a lot of people don't realize, like, a lot of people think like Airbnb's got like the total lock in the vacation rental market, but actually it's like a market that is probably, I don't want to say slipping away from them, but harder for them because there's more and more technology that makes it easier for the people who manage the Airbnbs to put it on every platform. So there's like channel managers and stuff like that. And there's property management systems that are independent of Airbnbs because people think they're easier. Airbnb hasn't done a good job of like integrating your cleaning schedule and stuff like that, right?
But those are expensive, aren't they? For like the average.
They have reasonable tiers. There are products that are catered to individual people. But then, this is the thing, you say they're expensive, there's also a layer of people who do like property management, right? So they don't necessarily own all the properties. Some of them semi-own some or own all of it. So like Sonder or something like that. But a lot of people basically will use those PMSs, CMSs to do that work, but they take your individual property and they manage it for you. Which like, if you're a hands-off investor, like you don't like, I think this is the thing, a lot of people underestimate how hard it is to run an Airbnb. Like you think, oh, I'll get a cleaner and I don't have to do it. Like you still need to make sure that they can get in, you need to find them, you need to book them at the right times, you need to sync it with your calendar. Property managers is easier. But then the property managers want to cut out the OTAs because they start to have such a large portfolio, they're like, why don't I just bring the customers myself? So yeah, that's kind of like a complicated market for them. And we work with a lot of those vacation rental managers and those software solutions who work with vacation rental managers because they just are talking to customers anyway, and customers ask them, can I leave a bag? And they say, no, you can't, here's a service and a discount.
Sounds like you have the customer journey or customer behavior figured out. How long did that take you?
It was in the first 2 weeks that it was over quite an extended period. I mean, like multiple years. I would say at the point that we had raised the round that we had raised before COVID, we were roughly at a point of product market fit. Like we had very meaningful traction and we understood how to scale the business and we understood who the partners were. I guess that would put it at like 3 or 4 years in to really, really understand like how people are using it, why people are using it, who the partners we need to make, how do we scale it to like, you know, transacting with tens to hundreds of transactions a day.
How important is it for an investor to see that the founder has the right amount of information about customer behavior, customer journey, and the industry?
There's a few things I like to see. I always ask people for some simple questions on like monthly traction or revenue, provided you have something. And basically if someone can't provide that, it's like, that's a huge red flag. Like, even if what you provided was not impressive, it's better to show that you're like on top of where, like you understand where you are. So that's one. But then the other thing is unit economics and understanding, you know, what are your variable costs, what are your fixed costs? And I suppose the fundamental thing with any investor is like, are you clear on the mechanical parts of your business where money flows into more revenue, right? Which like, I guess some people aren't, where they'll say like, we need this money to help us grow and like, we'll hire people and stuff.
That growth loop.
Yeah, exactly. But they haven't identified like, okay, actually like, you know, my platform needs to be at least this good and that means it needs to meet these functions. And then I have this acquisition channel and at the moment I'm getting a CPA of whatever, but you know, I think I can optimize that a bit and then I put money into that and then that's where most people will come from. You know, I also have this channel, but it's not as efficient or it needs more scale or I don't know, it's organic, so like.
And that's what I do.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that we got to that point.
You get it.
And so if we were to go back, look a little bit, you said fixed costs and variable costs. That's not on a pitch deck, is it?
It depends on your business.
Okay.
So it's one of the things that I think is most important. The thing that people would say, for example, oh, Uber can never make money, right? That's an understanding of unit costs, right? And the other one is, and I talk about this all the time, quick delivery grocery businesses, right? They are terrible businesses. So it's no wonder that as soon as like cheap money wasn't around, all of them are folding or trying to desperately sell to each other. And this is for a few reasons. Focusing on the unit costs one, like you can, if you're a grocery delivery business, you can raise a ton of capital and just keep launching new places and just talk about top line revenue and make it look like you're growing a healthy business, right? But ultimately, you know, anyone can build a good business where you're giving away £10 for £5, right? Like that on paper could look like a great business. Like you could, your revenue would grow, everyone would want to buy £10 for £5. That's basically what they're doing when it costs them so much to provide the service, which is, you know, some amount of convenience that's not enough to cover that cost, and they're subsidizing everything by giving people discounts and stuff. That's effectively what they do. So I would just say like unit costs are important because, okay, if you split your costs into fixed and variable, right? Variable are the ones that apply to unit, right? If you make 0 or less profit purely on a variable cost, clearly you can never cover your fixed costs. As long as you make 1 penny on each transaction above your variable costs, there is a theoretical number where you can cover your fixed costs. You know, generally you have to be a crazy high volume for 1 penny to be the amount where that makes sense. You'd be like a crypto trading platform or something. But yeah, like a solid understanding of like, either these are how profitable our unit economics are, and so this is how many transactions get us to break even, and these are the fixed costs we have to incur to run a decent platform, or an explanation of like, these are our current unit economics, and here's why they'll get better as we get bigger. And normally they do.
Yeah.
So it's not a standard one. It's not like, oh, problem, solution, blah. But it's one that I like to talk to people about, like, what are your unit costs? Like, how much does it cost to acquire someone? I saw one the other day where someone had sent me a deck, and it's a long story. It was like a group activity thing. And they said, like, oh, the one thing that people always want to see is LTV to CAC, and normally 3 to 1 is like the standard. They sent me something, and they said, okay, like, the profit that we'd make providing the service to 8 people would be, I can't remember what the number was, call it £400 for sake of easy maths. And I was like, okay, but if you're providing the service to 8 people, that means that if you have a CAC of, anything higher than 50 per person, you're making a loss. So you've not factored that into this unit cost of providing your service. And I didn't feel like it was a reasonable, realistic CAC for that service.
Okay.
That's a lot of words.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. It's hard to talk about numbers verbally.
For founders who are thinking about starting a business in the travel industry or are running one right now, what is your advice for them?
One, like I can tell you what the most difficult thing about the travel industry is, and everyone who works in travel knows it. It's that travel has a retention and repetition problem, right? So the problem, even if you think about someone like Airbnb, right? It's a fantastic company, it's done really well. How often can you stay at an Airbnb per year, right? Like it's a fixed number of times, it's going to be low. And for them to even, now they have really, they capture a lot of that, but they needed a really global network to capture a lot of those opportunities because there's only so often that people travel, right? And it also means that when people will generally need a travel service at a very specific time. So like if you sell protein shakes, right? You can sell protein shakes to anyone at any time, right? But if you sell a travel service, you can only sell to people while they're traveling. Like, people love going on holiday and having accommodation. If you go out and give people coupons for a free Airbnb stay tonight, go down to the station now, most people will be like, I don't need that, I'm going home. And it's the same thing for us with our service. The opportunities with really high LTVs are generally more saturated or kind of done, vacation rental, stuff like that. And it means that your CAC option, it's hard to acquire customers because you can't just pump money into Facebook or Google or whatever because it's so time sensitive.
Yeah, but it's about having that locksmith moment, is meeting the customer exactly where...
At the right time.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Generally, high intent marketing channels are better for that because they imply that it's the right time for that person. And demographic based marketing, depending on your service, it can be relevant, but it needs to be layered, right? So you can have an offering that's really particularly for people 18 to 35 who are relatively affluent, but it's not like other products where that just means you go on Facebook ads and stick it. No, you need to layer that with catching those people at the right time as well.
How can someone who has a super niche business attain a good marketing channel?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about our experience. One thing to consider is I said we work with vacation rental management companies, right? So travel tends to work with a lot of partnerships because if you're using one service, it implies that you'll need the other services, which is why when you're booking Ryanair, they put you to rental cars and to booking and stuff like that, because that's their way of validating that time signature.
Great. I know we covered only one thing about advice for the travel industry, but what are some other things that people need to be aware of when going into this industry?
Ooh, now's a good time. Okay. The fact that it's been relatively neglected and stuff creates more of an opportunity than it creates a problem. Like now's the time to start working on something. I would also say it is a area that is filled with legacy tech, which is a big opportunity. Yeah. So that's why you see opportunities where people are just taking conventional services and making APIs for them, like booking flights and booking hotels and stuff, because the old stuff's so legacy. I think that's the kind of the main stuff. And then, that kind of covers it.
Tell us a little bit about Treepoints. How did it start, and why a sustainability business? We were running a business. We learned a lot about setting up and running a startup, and it's a pretty normal path that after your first one, a lot of people come serial entrepreneurs, and then you kind of become more mission focused as you get older, after you've already done your financial security. What is it about that? Why, if you have an entrepreneurial mindset, why do you just keep coming back for that extra hit of dopamine? Yeah,
I think it's just... To be fair, it's one of the things I look for when we do investing. Do you become an entrepreneur because you think it's a good way to make money, or you think it's a way to build status? which are the wrong answers? Or do you do it because you, for whatever reason, are the type of person who couldn't really do anything else? Like, couldn't see yourself working 80 hours a week at a bank or a consultancy.
Can fit anywhere.
Yeah, couldn't fit in somewhere else.
Yeah.
Which I would say is roughly where I fit. Like, I didn't really have a choice because I just couldn't do other stuff. It just didn't, the idea of any of those just didn't suit me at all. So I had no choice. And when you find people like that, there are people who just won't give up because what else are they going to do? They don't have a choice. So why do you come back? Yeah, I think the other thing is that once you become an entrepreneur and you achieve any sort of level of success, I don't even know what job I would apply for. Like, what would the title be? Like, what would the size of the company be? I think sometimes you end up maybe one layer down in a startup that's a little bit bigger, which is what happens when you're acquired. But I just don't know what job I would look for. I don't know what function it would have.
Yeah. Back to 3 points.
Yeah. So what do we do? Why do we do it, and what do we do? It was just one of those ones where it's like, we'll do something mission driven. We just didn't happen to have the financial security because of COVID and Stasher, but that's all worked out. It's all fine. And it was literally just, what are things we care about? Did a little whiteboard session, climate change, financial inequity, which are really linked. I think a lot of people don't realize about climate change. The people who are most affected now and will be most affected are mostly people in developing countries. It's not that we'll hit X degrees and then water will just flood over London. The real problem in the near term is people with crops that continually fail, or in areas that have become unlivable because of changes in temperature, or are seeing kind of desert encroachment or tidal erosion or something like that, right? So we kind of realized that addressing one addresses both of them, and we basically looked at some of the consumer opportunities, looked at what existed, and thought, it'd be interesting to, we went through a few ideas, and we were like, it'd be interesting to make a subscription for individuals that it ties together with brands, so it effectively rewards them. That was the original focus. We still offer it, but basically the kind of steps where we did that, then we're like, actually, B2B subscriptions make more sense to scale as a business. And then we kind of realized, we're talking to these businesses, the stuff that they're really interested in is API integrations. And then even more specific, we're like, that's a good product, but a lot of the businesses we work with are e-commerce and don't have good tech teams, and actually it's even easier if you can integrate into whatever platforms they're already using, like Shopify and things like that. So that's kind of the API stuff, and the Shopify stuff is where we spend most of the time. And then we also offer consulting services.
Amazing.
So we have someone who's done a bunch of GHD accounting qualifications, and our sustainability manager, Fran, she's great. And she will offer life cycle assessments, advice on reduction, as well as options for offsetting and climate action through us.
Amazing. So now it's a Shopify app add-on that
there
people can
download.
download?
App. There's an API, so people can add it to their store. And there is also the consulting.
Okay. And so what's been the most interesting fact you find out since you got into the industry?
Ooh, what's been the most interesting fact about climate change, you mean?
Yeah, so about businesses dealing with climate change. Do you find that's something that a lot of businesses are actively trying to take on?
I think the thing that's interesting is it is a less well-defined space than anyone realizes. Yep. So I think a lot of people are like, I want to be carbon neutral, I want to be net zero, and they don't think what does that term mean? Who's policing that term?
Is there anyone policing that?
So there's layers to this, right? So there are international standards. Some of them are private, some of them are large multinational NGO standards. But you can also self-certify. So some people, you can effectively say it and give your reasoning. It's really all about how do you provide documentation explaining what's backing up your claim. To consumers and to whoever else wants to check, right? Okay. You should be as transparent as possible.
So if someone has 3 points in their Shopify store, for example, does that give them a certification, or does that give them...
So the certification that we do is purely through the consulting, right? Because to qualify, say, a product or a business as carbon neutral, there's a bunch of inputs you need that you can semi-automate, but a lot of it will require manual input.
They do add that on their website, and that increases trust with the customers.
Then they can, yeah. So in the consulting case, so for example, we work with a soap and washing liquid company called Wilton, who do that. And then at Wilton London, they do a bunch of soaps. And that was we did a life cycle assessment with them, got a bunch of information on the ingredients that are in their goods, the processes they use, where things are moving from and to, and did a consultation, and then used that to base the amount that they were going to be able to reduce and then offset the remainder. So that's purely through consulting. The app integration is really like more about branding, feel good, showing commitment to doing something by accessing climate services like tree planting, carbon offsetting.
Okay, so every time someone checks us out from that store, trees planted?
So it's a mix. So you as the person who has the e-commerce store can either choose to subsidize that, yes, or you can add it to your checkout and allow customers to do it. So basically, it's just that some businesses, the nature of their business is that they don't have the margin to cover, a 20 to 25p tree per sale. It depends what your margin is, right?
What is something you didn't expect about running a sustainability company?
You'd think that doing good feels good, and it does. Like I was saying today, like my favorite part of the month with that is like the point where we take the month's activity and make the donation to the partners that we're working with. And it's quite cool to see like, oh yeah, this is done blah, blah, blah this month. And it's a moment of like, that's cool. There's a lot of trees that's been planted because we bothered doing something. So it does feel good, don't get me wrong, but it's also quite exhausting because rightly so, there's a lot of scrutiny around like when you're doing good, right? So it's the same way that anytime that anyone does charity, they want to know, where's my money going, right? And it's just quite tiring. Like you have to tiring is not the right word. It's more intensive than I realized. In retrospect, it feels obvious. Like, of course you need to be super transparent and explain how you're doing all the things you're doing, because why else would anyone trust you? And it's an important check and balance on people, because otherwise that's when people commit fraud.
Did you start the second startup with your co-founder as well?
Yeah.
Luke. Okay.
He's a good dude. So
nice. How did you guys meet?
We were best friends at uni and met on the first day. We were in the same corridor, and then we were roommates.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Amazing.
How stereotypical.
Yeah.
We work well together though. It's not just because we're friends. That's a lot of people misconception. Someone asked us about this today. It's not necessarily a good idea to work with your friends. If you find someone that you work with well and you happen to be friends, that's amazing. Find them as a co-founder. But just because you're friends doesn't mean you work well together. How
do you want to retire, Anthony?
I think there's a funny story. We were at a conference in America, and this guy was telling it was like a kind of young whatever founders thing. And the guy's like, I'm going to tell you a story. So a guy's living on the beach in Mexico, and he fishes and brings it home for his family and stuff. And one day there's an American kind of executive type who's around, he's on holiday, and he sees this guy going out fishing, and he says, oh wow man, what are you doing? He says, well, I live here, I fish, I come back, I play, board games with my family, and chill with my grandchildren, have fun, have a beer with my friends. And he says, oh man, but what if you, got a better fishing rod, you catch more fish? And he's like, why would I do that? And he's like, well, if you caught more fish, you could sell the fish and you could buy a second boat. And he's like,
why would I do that?
And he kind of tells it, he really milked it. He went the whole way. And he's like, and then you'd have a corporation where you're doing fish. And he's like, why would I do that? And he's like, you can sell it, and then you can retire. You can live on the beach in Mexico, and you can chill with your family, and you can drink beer, and you can play board games, and you can go, chill fishing from a boat.
I'm already doing that.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the funny part. The American guy tells us a story, and we're like, he says, what's the point of this? And we're like, think about what you value in life. Don't chase status and vanity and money. And he was like, no, the point is empire building and building a huge corporation. And we're like, that's not what that story means. You've absolutely missed the point. So just talking about retirement reminded me of that. It was just so American that he told that story and entirely missed the point of it. His own story. Lovely guy though. But what do I want to do when I retire? I'm not really I'm so far away from it. I'm many, many, many years, and I intend to kind of keep mentally active probably until the day that I die. It doesn't mean I'll work a 9 to 5, 5 days a week until the day I die, but I expect to do interesting things. So it's more, at what point do I think I'll stop working a 9 to 5? Don't know. Depends how tired I get.
Yeah. You mentioned in the beginning of this, you said, I focus on building or having an environment of happiness.
Yeah, optimizing to happiness.
Optimizing to happiness. What does that mean? Happiness, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, so to me, I mean the practicality of that statement, optimizing to happiness, is just be aware when you are trading opportunities to make marginally more money at the cost of other things, right? Be aware when enough is enough of anything, or when something is not enough. So am I not getting enough personal time? Am I not getting enough sleep? Yep. Am I not getting enough time off? But yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, what is my personal balance? I mean, I kind of work at a rate where I feel like I could sustain it forever. I don't I'm very much not of the mindset of like work so that you can reach some point where then you get a lot of money and never need to work again, because I'm not interested in doing that. I'm doing what I enjoy at a rate that I am capable of sustaining and find enjoyable.
Has it always been the case for you?
Ish. I mean, like we have like more control now more than ever, because we're kind of hitting a point where we're kind of break even, so it's default alive. Like there's not pressure to like raise money or hit numbers to impress like certain things. But you know, you're still ambitious. You still want to grow. But yeah, you kind of realize like doing this sustainably is actually the better result in the midterm, because you're not exhausted, you're not unhappy. But has it always been like that? You know, there are tougher times or lonelier times earlier on. It's a smaller team. There are fewer people there. More falls on you. More of the kind of more junior work falls on you, which sometimes is less interesting than managing people and making big decisions.
Nice, amazing. It's been great meeting you, Anthony.
No
Honestly,
problem.
so impressed by you the minute I met you in
Don't be.
office in Shoreditch.
It's all an illusion.
Loving what you have achieved and what you're doing so far, and
Thank
achieved
you.
to the people around you as well, because it seems like you're driven by the right values in life. And
My mother would like you very much.
So one last question, and we haven't touched on this at all, is the tech stack. So you don't come from a coding background, but you still managed to build a tech product.
Yep.
How did you do that? How are you sustaining that?
With so much difficulty. We started with a third-party product called ShareTribe.
Okay. I know that.
Yeah. It's great for marketplace MVPs, and they're now better for like progressing to an adult business.
Subscription, right? You pay per month?
Yes, it's a SaaS.
Yeah.
And then we had like an adapted WooCommerce WordPress website, and then we did our own build at the point where we built enough traction to raise money to hire developers.
Okay.
And I mean, now it's kind of just a fairly normal stack, like US hosting for a normal Postgres SQL database, Python backend, React front end, pretty standard like stack for nowadays. So not too hard to hire for. And honestly, we just learned more and more along the way. Like one thing I would say to younger self would be like take a course, even just read more online so that you just understand enough to communicate effectively. But a lot of it we just learned by doing. It's been several years now. And try and find advisors that you trust to help with hiring, and then when you hire, trust the people you hire. Well, hire trustworthy people and then trust them.
Yep. Amazing.
Cool. Nice to meet you too. I mean, probably I've seen you around secretly. Don't tell anyone. We've actually seen each other before.
Yeah.
We've been in the same office. And I'm likewise very impressed by you.
Thank you. Any last wise words?
Oh, wise words.
Oh, what is that thing you said earlier? Like right tech at the right time.
Oh yeah, actually this is
like
it. This is a really important one on the tech question actually. I think one thing that's really interesting is right tech for the right time. Like so I said we did ShareTribe, then we did an adapted WordPress, then we did this self-build, right? Each of them made sense at the time. Each of them was hitting a certain level of validation and then having the resources to build something better, even if it meant building from scratch. Like unless you are an excellent developer yourself, or you have found the impossible, the perfect CTO is going to be perfect at the beginning and at the end, like you're going to have to change your stack over time. And the truth is actually like hiring a CTO is incredibly hard because you know the person that you want at the beginning, you want someone scrappy. You want someone who can kind of doesn't mind being who knows a lot about a little bit about many things, who's willing to just get stuff out there. And then in the middle, you want someone who like maybe is a little more focused, maybe is a better manager. And then at the end, like really, they shouldn't be touching code at all. They shouldn't even be reviewing code at the point where you have like a company of 50 to 100 people barely reviewing code. They're really just a senior manager who understands technology. Like those are very different people. And I don't know why, maybe I'm totally biased and wrong, but I feel like the C-suite, whether that's your CMO or your CSO, do people have chief sales officers? I don't know. Or CEO. CMO. It's somehow more adaptable from the like 2-person to 100 to 1,000 person stage than it is for the technical person. Cool.
Amazing.